You know, sometimes a case comes along that just seems impossible on its face. A grandfather is convicted of a truly terrible crime against his own family, gets a massive sentence, and then a higher court comes in and completely reverses the verdict. How does that even happen? Well, let's get into the incredible details of the case of Abdul Hamid.
Okay, so let's dive right in. This whole story really kicks off with just one single number, 20.
That's 20 years. The prison sentence handed down to a 70-year-old grandfather by a special court in Nagan, Assam, all the way back on September 30th, 2024. And this wasn't just any charge. We're talking about one of the most serious offenses imaginable, the aggravated sexual assault of his own minor granddaughter. This was under Section 6 of the POCO Act, which is India's Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So you hear that and you think, case closed, right? The facts presented to that first court seemed absolutely damning. Which brings us to the big question. How on earth did a higher court, the Guwahati High Court, look at the same case and rule that he was completely innocent? Let's break down exactly how this whole thing was unraveled. All right, so first up, let's really dig into the case that the trial court heard. We have to understand what evidence they saw that made them hand down such a severe 20-year conviction in the first place. So here's the story the prosecution laid out. You've got a 16-year-old girl who was sent to live with her grandfather, Abdul Hamid, to help with chores since her grandmother was ill. But according to her testimony, while she was there, he sexually assaulted her, and that assault led to a pregnancy. It was her mother who filed the police report, which made the granddaughter the absolute key witness in this case. And, based on that account, the special judge was convinced. The court's decision really hinged almost entirely on the granddaughter's testimony. They believed her story, and that belief led directly to that 2-decade sentence of rigorous imprisonment for Abdul Hamid. Okay, so conviction, long sentence. You'd think that's the end of it, but no, not even close. Abdul Hamid appealed his conviction to the Guwahati High Court, arguing that the whole trial was fundamentally, deeply flawed. The defense came out swinging. Their whole argument was that the trial judge, well, let me just give you the direct quote from the appeal. They said he did not consider the evidence on record and arrived at a perverse finding. Basically, they were saying the judge flat out ignored critical evidence that completely blew up the prosecution's story. Now we're moving to the appeal, and this is where the defense really starts to pick apart the prosecution's narrative piece by piece. They started by focusing on the victim's own words. And wow, this is where things get really, really interesting. Just look at the massive difference between what the victim said at 2 different times. In her first official statement to a magistrate, she clearly alleges penetrative sexual assault on multiple occasions, a crime that would absolutely explain a pregnancy. But then, when she's in court, under oath, her story changes. Now she just says he committed a bad act by touching her inappropriately, and that no other incident had taken place. From a legal perspective, those are 2 completely different worlds. But the defense didn't just stop at pointing out these inconsistencies. They offered up a whole different reason for why this case was even happening in the first place: a bitter family fight over property. They claimed that Abdul Hamid owned some farmland, and that his daughter, the victim's mom, had been demanding he signed it over to her. When he said no, the defense argued, this entire accusation was cooked up as revenge. So at this point, you've got a shaky testimony, you've got this whole land dispute, there's definitely some doubt creeping in. But then came the bombshell, the one piece of cold, hard scientific evidence that was about to blow this whole case wide open. So let's remember the crucial point here. The prosecution's entire case, everything, was built on that pregnancy. It was their undeniable physical proof that a serious assault had happened. She attributed that pregnancy solely to her grandfather. But was he responsible? And here it is, the answer. The official DNA profile test came back, and it was conclusive. In the exact words of the High Court's judgment, the DNA of the child of the prosecutrix did not match the DNA of the accused/appellant. It's black and white. He was not the father. Okay. So this brings us to a super important legal concept called substantive evidence. Think of it like this. Some evidence, like a witness changing their story, just makes you question their credibility. It pokes a hole. But substantive evidence, like this DNA report, it stands on its own to prove a fact. It's not just a detail, it's definitive proof. It's a game changer. So with that DNA result, which is just an undeniable scientific fact, the High Court had a very clear path forward. They laid out this perfectly logical explanation for why they had to completely overturn the conviction. And you can literally follow their train of thought step by step. It's fascinating. Okay, step 1. The DNA proves another man is the father. Period. Step 2. That means the victim's central claim, the very heart of her accusation, is proven to be false. Step 3. If the most important part of her story is false, how can a court possibly trust anything else she says? Her entire testimony becomes unreliable. And since a conviction has to be based on evidence that a court has confidence in, well, the conclusion is obvious. The conviction simply cannot be sustained. Basically, the court was saying, look, the prosecution didn't even prove the most basic foundational part of their accusation. And this is legally really important because it meant a special rule under the POCSO Act, which can sometimes presume guilt and put more of the burden on the accused, couldn't even be used here. The prosecution's case never even got off the ground. And if you want one line from the judgment that just sums up the whole thing, the court said it perfectly. They said the DNA test washes away the very edifice on which the victim's case was built. The entire structure, the foundation, the whole thing just crumbled. And with that, it was over. The High Court set aside the conviction, scrapped the 20-year sentence, and ordered that Abdul Hamid be released from jail immediately. Just done. This case really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? When you have a person's deeply personal testimony, their story, crashing right into cold, hard, irrefutable scientific proof, how does a court even begin to find the true path to justice? It's a powerful reminder of the incredible challenge the justice system faces, trying to balance human stories with scientific facts.